You ever hear about the German shepherd who saved a little girl's life and then helped her find her voice again? In court? It sounds like something out of a movie, but it really happened. At first, it was just another police call, a welfare check. But when officers broke through that door, they didn't find noise or chaos. They found silence. And in the middle of that silence, a child, barely breathing. What happened next would shake an entire town and remind the world why we call dogs man's best friend. See, loyalty isn't just a word with German shepherds. It's their heartbeat. And this story, of a canine named Coda and a little girl named Lena, shows how love, even from a dog, can rebuild something we thought was gone forever. I've spent years studying real stories like this, stories of police dogs, service animals, and the incredible bond that saves lives in ways medicine never could. Stay with me. Because by the end of this video, you won't just see what this dog did. You'll feel what it means to be truly seen, protected, and loved by the kind of loyalty only a dog can give. The apartment was drowning in silence. Not the peaceful kind, but the heavy, suffocating silence that clings to the walls like damp air. The television flickered in the corner, its muted screen flashing between commercials and static, throwing ghostly light over a small, cluttered living room. Half-empty soda cans lined the coffee table like forgotten soldiers. The smell of stale sugar and something sour lingered in the air, mixing with the faint hum of the refrigerator that never quite shut properly. On the worn carpet, Lena, a 6-year-old girl with tangled brown hair and hollow cheeks, sat cross-legged, hugging a threadbare teddy bear to her chest. The bear's fur was matted from years of clutching. One button eye hung loose as if even it was tired of watching. Lena's tiny fingers traced its frayed stitching again and again, a quiet rhythm that kept her company in the endless hours of waiting. Her mother lay sprawled on the couch, one arm hanging off the side, an open can of soda resting precariously on her stomach. Around her were the remains of the day, empty chip bags, a plastic takeout container, a half-eaten burger turning cold. The faint sound of her breathing, rough and uneven, was the only proof she was alive. Lena turned her gaze to the TV. Cartoon characters danced silently across the screen, their smiles bright and happy, so different from the world around her. Her stomach growled softly, but she ignored it. She had learned long ago that hunger was just another part of her day, like brushing her teeth or waiting for her mother to wake up. The girl reached for a can of cola beside her, struggling to open it with weak hands. When she finally did, the fizz startled her. She took a sip, grimacing at the sharp sweetness. It was all she had to drink, all she had for dinner. Her head felt light again. Sometimes she wondered if it was normal to feel dizzy, to feel her heart beating so fast after drinking soda instead of eating real food. But she never asked, because asking made her mother angry. "Don't start whining, Lena," she would snap, her voice slurred from exhaustion or something stronger. "You have food. You've got soda. Be grateful." So Lena stopped asking. She stopped speaking much at all. The walls around her seemed to hum with silence. From the next apartment came faint sounds, a radio playing softly, a kettle whistling, a couple arguing about something ordinary. Life was happening next door, warm and alive, while in Lena's home, everything felt still. A faint cough escaped her lips. It was dry, brittle, almost too small to notice. She pulled her blanket tighter around her shoulders. The cough returned, sharper this time. Her throat burned. Through the thin wall, Mrs. Parker, the elderly neighbor, paused her knitting. She thought she'd heard something, a small, hacking sound. She turned off her radio and listened. Silence. Probably just the TV next door, she thought. That child's always watching cartoons. She sighed and went back to her chair, shaking her head. Kids these days, left alone too long. Still, she didn't knock. Not yet. In the apartment, Lena shifted uncomfortably. She looked at her mother again. Still asleep. Always asleep. She whispered to her bear. Mama said she'll take me to the park tomorrow. Her voice was thin, uncertain, as if she didn't quite believe it. She pressed her cheek against the bear's worn head and added softly, maybe she forgot. The flickering TV cast long shadows over the room. The ticking clock on the wall seemed louder as the evening deepened. Outside, the city buzzed faintly, cars honking, people laughing, doors closing. The world kept moving forward, completely unaware that behind one closed door, a little girl's light was fading bit by bit. The air grew colder as night fell. Lena shivered. Her body felt strange, heavy and floaty all at once. Her eyes drooped, but she forced them open. She didn't want to sleep yet. She was afraid she might not wake up. Somewhere deep down, even at 6, she knew something was wrong with her body. But how do you explain that when no one's listening? The refrigerator clicked off. The silence that followed was absolute. Her cough came back, worse this time. She pressed her hand to her chest, wheezing softly. She glanced toward her mother, hoping maybe she'd stir. But the woman on the couch didn't move. So Lena did what she always did. She whispered to her bear instead. I think I'm sick, Teddy, she said weakly. But don't tell Mama, okay? She'll be mad. Her words hung in the air like smoke, fading into nothing. Across the wall, Mrs. Parker frowned again. That cough. It sounded worse. Maybe she should call or knock. But then she hesitated. The mother next door wasn't exactly friendly. The last time she'd offered help, the woman had slammed the door in her face, saying she was fine. So Mrs. Parker turned the radio back on, a soft old tune filling her room, trying to drown out the sound of her guilt. Inside the apartment, the lights flickered once, then steadied. Lena tried to stand, reaching for the water bottle on the counter. Her legs trembled. The room swayed. She pressed one hand against the wall to keep balance, breathing shallowly. She took one step, then another. Her teddy bear slipped from her grasp and landed on the floor with a soft thud. For a moment, she stared at it, her vision blurring. Time was 400 moms. She bent to pick it up, but her fingers missed. Everything felt far away, like she was underwater. The last thing she remembered was the flicker of the TV screen, flashing white and blue across the ceiling. Her small body gave way, collapsing beside the bear. The sound was so soft that even the refrigerator's hum swallowed it whole. The apartment went quiet again. Through the wall, Mrs. Parker stirred one last time, sensing something wasn't right. She turned down her radio and listened. No coughing, no TV, no sound. Just silence. Strange, she murmured, glancing at the clock. Almost midnight. She frowned, uneasy now, but she didn't move. Not yet. She sat there for a long moment, staring at her closed door, wondering if she should check. Her hand hovered over the phone, then pulled back. Maybe in the morning, she thought. It's probably nothing. Outside, the city lights shimmered like distant stars. Cars passed. Laughter echoed. Life went on. Inside that small apartment, the TV kept flickering, its light blinking over a scene frozen in stillness. A mother asleep in her cluttered world, and a child lying motionless beside her broken teddy bear. The sound of the refrigerator clicked on again, its steady hum filling the room, trying to hide the truth that silence had finally taken over. And in that silence, the world lost something fragile, a voice too small to be heard, a life too easy to overlook. The night swallowed the apartment whole. The night dragged on, thick and endless. The apartment felt colder now, as though the warmth had bled out of its walls. The television had finally gone black, leaving behind a faint electric hum and the soft glow of a street lamp pushing through the curtains. The silence was deeper than before, the kind that makes even the smallest sound feel like an echo. On the floor, Lena stirred. Her breathing was shallow, erratic. She blinked weakly, trying to understand why everything looked blurred. The air felt heavy, her head pounded, her lips cracked and dry. The bottle of water sat just a few steps away, half full, glistening faintly under the lamplight. She tried to crawl toward it, her small hands pressed against the carpet, trembling. Each movement took all her strength. The teddy bear she had dropped earlier lay beside her, its one remaining eye staring blankly at the ceiling. Lena reached for it first, as if afraid to leave it behind. But her arm gave out. The bear rolled away, landing near her mother's shoes. "Mama," she whispered. The word barely came out. Her mother didn't stir. The woman's breathing was slow, deep, lost in the haze of exhaustion, or something darker. Lena watched her for a moment, waiting for her to move, to wake up, to notice. But she never did. The girl turned back to the water bottle. Her throat burned. She dragged herself forward inch by inch. Her fingers brushed the edge of the plastic, but it slipped away, rolling out of reach. She let out a soft cry, not loud enough to wake anyone, just a fragile sound swallowed by the still air. She lay there for a while, her cheek against the carpet, eyes half open. The faint taste of sugar still lingered on her tongue from the soda she had drunk earlier. It made her thirst worse. The buzzing in her ears grew louder. Outside, the city hummed, a faraway world that didn't know she existed. Cars passed. Distant laughter floated up from the street. And somewhere, a siren wailed. Not for her. Not yet. Across the wall, Mrs. Parker had been awake longer than usual. Something felt off. She'd been trying to ignore it, telling herself she was just overthinking. But the silence from next door wasn't normal. Usually there'd be the faint sound of the TV or the shuffle of small footsteps. Tonight, nothing. She stood by the wall, listening. No coughing, no movement. The quiet pressed against her chest like a weight. "Maybe they're asleep," she whispered. But the words didn't convince her. She looked at the clock. 2:14 a.m. The city outside was quieter now, the kind of hour when people dream or regret. She hesitated, then turned down her radio again. Nothing. Just silence. Finally, she walked to her phone. Her hands shook slightly as she dialed. 911, what's your emergency? The voice on the other end startled her. She almost hung up. unsure what to say. I don't know if this counts as an emergency, she began, her tone hesitant, guilty even. I live in apartment 3B and my neighbor's in 3A, the woman and her little girl. It's been quiet all night. Too quiet. No lights. I think something's wrong next door. The dispatcher asked for details. Mrs. Parker gave what she could. The operator's tone softened. Ma'am, we'll send a unit to check. Please stay nearby in case they need access. Thank you, she whispered, her eyes darting to the wall again. Back inside apartment 3A. Lena tried to lift her head. Her vision swam. Everything looked washed in gray and yellow. The air seemed too thin. The world too far away. She thought she heard voices. Maybe the cartoons. Maybe something else. Her tiny hand reached forward again, fingers twitching. She wanted to reach the door. Maybe if she could knock, someone would hear her. But her body wouldn't obey anymore. The hum of the refrigerator became the loudest sound in the room. It filled the silence like a cruel lullaby. Then faintly, footsteps in the hallway. Voices. A knock on the door. Police, hello? Anyone home? Lena's eyes fluttered open. The sound was faint, but real. She tried to answer, to call out, but only a rasp left her lips. The effort made her chest ache. The officers outside knocked again, harder this time. This is the police. We received a welfare call. Inside, the mother stirred slightly, but didn't wake. The officers exchanged looks. Let's get maintenance to unlock it, one said. Lena could hear the muffled noise, keys rattling, footsteps, distant chatter. Hope flickered, a small spark that made her reach out one last time. Her hand trembled as she stretched toward the doorway. Her fingers brushed the carpet, dragging weakly forward. She imagined someone opening the door and finding her. Imagined the light spilling in, warm and safe. But her strength was gone. Her head dropped against the floor, her hair falling across her face. Her breathing slowed to a faint, uneven rhythm. Outside, Mrs. Parker waited anxiously in her robe, watching the officers work. Her heart pounded. She heard one of them curse under his breath. The kaito, sound of metal against metal as they forced the lock. Inside, the faint clatter of the door handle echoed through the apartment, a sound that would have woken anyone but the woman on the couch. The door creaked open. For a second, only the beam of a flashlight cut through the darkness, slicing across soda cans, wrappers, the lifeless glow of the TV screen, and then landing on the tiny shape on the floor. Here, one officer shouted. We've got a child down. The room exploded into movement, boots rushing in, radios crackling, urgent voices filling the silence that had hung for too long. Mrs. Parker, standing outside the door, covered her mouth, eyes wide. She could see just enough to know she had been right. The guilt hit her all at once, for waiting, for hesitating, for pretending that silence was harmless. Inside, one of the officers knelt beside Lena, checking her pulse. It was faint, thready. She's breathing, but barely. Another called for medics. Get EMS up here now. Possible hypoglycemia. Severe dehydration. She's cold to the touch. As they worked, the faint sound of sirens began to rise in the distance, growing louder, closer, merging with the heartbeat of the moment. The lights of the city flashed against the window, red and blue, painting the room in alternating shades of tragedy and hope. Lena's small hand twitched once more, still reaching for the doorway. For a brief second, it seemed as if she was aware, as if she could feel that someone had finally come for her. Then the sirens drowned everything. Her hand went still. The officer pressed his radio again, voice firm but trembling. "We've got her. She's alive, for now." Outside, Mrs. Parker wiped at her eyes, whispering to no one, "Hold on, sweetheart. Just hold on." And as the stretcher was brought in, the apartment filled with sound at last. The sound of rushing footsteps, medical orders, the rustle of blankets, and the faint, steady rhythm of a child's fragile breath being pulled back from the edge. The silence that had ruled for so long was broken. But the heartbreak it left behind would linger long after the sirens faded away. The sirens wailed down the street, slicing through the quiet of the sleeping neighborhood. Red and blue lights flashed across the building walls, painting everything in frantic color. The hum of the city faded beneath the sound of urgency, tires screeching, radios crackling, voices overlapping. From the back of the patrol SUV, a German shepherd stirred. His name was Coda, a 6-year-old K-9 officer with eyes that seemed to understand more than they should. His handler, Officer Ruiz, opened the back door, voice calm but firm. "Let's work, buddy." Coda jumped down from the vehicle, his paws hitting the pavement with a soft thud. The air was cool, heavy with the scent of rain from earlier that night. But underneath it was something else, something faint, human, wrong. His ears flicked forward. 2 patrol officers waited by the apartment door. Mrs. Parker stood nearby, trembling in her robe, arms wrapped around herself. "It's apartment 3A, she whispered. "The mother's inside. The little girl, too, I think." Officer Ruiz nodded, giving her a brief, reassuring glance. "We'll take care of it." He looked down at Coda. "Find." The dog's nose lifted immediately, catching the faintest trace of something. Sickness, sugar, the sharp tang of neglect that humans never notice. Coda's breathing deepened, tail straightening as he pulled forward toward the door. "Police!" one officer called, pounding on the door. No answer. He tried again, louder. "Police! We need to check on your welfare." Nothing, but silence. Ruiz pressed his ear against the door, listening. Then he shook his head. No movement. He glanced at the sergeant. "We're going in. Time 400 pounds." The door splintered under the ram, the lock giving way with a metallic groan. The moment it opened, the smell hit them. Stale air, spoiled food, soda, something faintly sweet and rotting. It was the smell of life, gone wrong. Coda stepped forward first, nose working fast. The flashlight beams danced across piles of clothes, empty cans, and a still figure on the couch. "Clear left," Ruiz murmured. Coda didn't wait for orders. He moved carefully through the narrow path between furniture, sniffing the air, tail low but steady. His world was made of scent and sound, and here both told him something was very wrong. The faint hum of a refrigerator, the static of a dead TV, the soft rasp of shallow breathing, somewhere close. Then he froze. Ears forward, head tilted, nostrils flaring. Beneath the clutter, beyond the smell of sugar and dust, there it was, the faint human scent of distress, sickness, and fear. He turned sharply toward the floor beside the couch. Officer Ruiz followed the motion instantly, flashlight beam cutting through the dim light. And there she was. Lena. A small body curled on the carpet, one arm outstretched toward the door. Her skin was pale, her lips dry and cracked. For a heartbeat, no one moved. Then Ruiz's voice broke the stillness. "Found her! We've got a child down!" The other officers rushed over, radios bursting to life. "Dispatch, we need EMS priority, child unconscious, possibly dehydrated and hypoglycemic." But Coda didn't wait for the humans. He moved closer, his massive frame lowering beside her. He sniffed her hair gently, then her tiny hand. Her fingers twitched faintly at the touch. A soft whine escaped him, low, mournful, but steady. It was, as if he was speaking to her in the only way he could. "I'm here." Ruiz knelt beside them, checking the girl's pulse. Weak, barely there. He swallowed hard, muttering under his breath, "Come on, kid. Stay with us." Coda didn't move. He stayed pressed against her side, head low, eyes fixed on her face. His breathing was calm, controlled, the same steady rhythm that had comforted lost children before. But even he seemed to understand how close this one was to slipping away. Behind them, officers cleared the rest of the apartment, the mother still unconscious on the couch, the rest of the space reeking of neglect. One officer swore softly, "Jesus, look at this place." "Leave it," Ruiz snapped quietly. "Focus on her." The faint wail of sirens began again, closer this time. Ruiz pressed his radio. "Dispatch, we've got one minor located. Breathing shallow. Request medics at scene. We need them now." Coda stayed still until Ruiz spoke again. "Good boy, Coda. Stay with her." The dog let out another low whine, almost like a sigh. He shifted just enough to rest his head near Lena's hand. The moment his fur brushed her skin, her fingers moved, barely, but enough to make Ruiz look up in shock. "She's reacting," he whispered. "She can feel him." Within seconds, medics burst through the doorway, carrying bags and monitors. "Where is she?" one called. "Here!" Ruiz motioned them in. The room filled with noise, the rustle of equipment, clipped medical commands, oxygen valves hissing. One paramedic leaned close to the child, checking her vitals. "She's still alive. Barely," he said grimly. "BP's low, pulse faint. Let's move." Another medic looked down at Coda, who hadn't budged. For a moment the chaos paused. The dog was still, eyes fixed on the girl, body tense but protective, like he was guarding something sacred. "Good boy," the medic whispered softly, brushing Coda's shoulder before turning back to the gurney. "You found her just in time." They lifted Lena carefully, fitting a mask over her small face as starting an IV. Ruiz stood back, giving them space. But Coda didn't move until Ruiz gave a quiet signal. "Okay, partner, let's go." Coda stepped back reluctantly, tail lowering, eyes following as they carried the child out the door. The apartment fell into silence again, broken only by the hum of the refrigerator and the faint creak of floorboards. Ruiz took a slow breath, running a hand through his hair. That could have gone bad fast. Coda sat by the door, staring after the child. He gave one last soft sound, part whine, part sigh, before Ruiz patted his neck. "You did good tonight, boy." Outside, the flashing lights reflected in Coda's dark eyes as they stepped into the cool night air. The paramedics were loading Lena into the ambulance, her small form covered in a blanket, wires running from her arm. Coda hesitated at the curb, ears back. Ruiz opened the patrol car, but didn't push him in. The dog looked up, then toward the ambulance again, as if torn between duty and something deeper. Ruiz smiled faintly. Go on. Say goodbye. Coda padded forward, his step silent. He stopped near the back of the ambulance, where the doors were still open. For a moment he stood there, gaze fixed on her small, motionless figure. Then quietly, he sat down beside the vehicle, posture calm, steady, a silent guardian keeping watch as the medics worked. When they finally closed the doors, Coda let out a slow exhale, as if releasing the weight of what had almost been lost. Ruiz clipped his leash back on and whispered, "Good boy, you did your job." But as they walked back to the patrol car, Ruiz glanced down at his partner, and he could swear that Coda's eyes lingered on the ambulance lights long after it drove away, as though he knew this wasn't the end of their story. The ambulance doors slammed shut, cutting off the sound of the night. Inside, the space filled with the sharp scent of antiseptic, sweat, and urgency. Monitors beeped in uneven rhythm, and the interior lights painted everything in harsh white. On the stretcher lay Lena, her small frame almost lost beneath wires and tubes. Her skin was ghostly pale, lips tinged blue. Each shallow breath fogged the oxygen mask strapped over her face. A paramedic pressed 2 fingers to her neck, searching for a pulse, while another hung a bag of clear fluid from the ceiling rail. "Pressure's dropping again," one of them barked. "Push 20 mils, now." The vehicle lurched as it sped through the streets, sirens screaming above them. The world outside was a blur of color, red lights bending, shadows flashing by. Inside, the only thing that mattered was that fragile heartbeat on the monitor. At the front, Coda sat rigid beside Officer Ruiz, his body tense, eyes locked on the reflection in the steel wall that separated him from the medics. Every time the paramedics moved, his ears twitched. Every time Lena's monitor beeped irregularly, his chest rose with a quick, shallow breath. Ruiz kept glancing at him between turns. "Easy, boy. They've got her." But Coda wasn't listening. His head tilted, nose pointed toward the rear doors. Even from here he could smell her, the faint, fading scent of a child slipping away. It was the smell of cold skin and fear, something no training could teach him to ignore. In the back, a medic's voice cracked through the tension. "Heart rate's dropping, 60, 58. "Come on, baby," another whispered. "Stay with us." A syringe clicked. Fluid entered the IV line, and still, the monitor stuttered. Coda's tail lowered slowly to the floor. A sound escaped him, soft, mournful, long. It wasn't loud enough to distract the crew, but it filled the air, weaving through the sound of machines like a prayer. That low whine made Ruiz's throat tighten. He knew that sound. Coda had made it once before, the night they'd found a lost boy in a ravine. Too late. Ruiz clenched the steering wheel harder. "Not tonight," he muttered. "Not this one." The ambulance hit a bump. The monitor gave a shrill, flat tone for half a second, long enough to make every heartbeat in the cabin stop. Then the medic shouted, "We've got movement again! Pulse climbing! She's fighting!" Someone exhaled shakily, laughing under his breath. "Good girl." The whine from the front stopped. Coda's ears flicked, his body shifting slightly, as if he understood. The ambulance sped on through empty streets. The dispatcher's voice came through the radio. "ETA, 3 minutes. Emergency unit standing by." When the vehicle screeched to a halt outside St. Mary's Hospital, the back doors burst open. The cold air rushed in like a wave. The paramedics moved fast, shouting vitals, pulling the gurney down the ramp. Coda leapt out of the passenger seat before Ruiz could stop him, paws hitting the pavement. He followed the team up to the sliding doors until a nurse blocked him gently. "Sorry, boy," she said softly. "You can't come in there." Ruiz caught up, looping a hand through Coda's harness. "He's with me," he explained quickly. "K9 unit." He found her. The nurse hesitated, then nodded. "Then he can wait in the hall." As the medical team disappeared behind swinging doors, Ruiz and Coda stood just outside the intensive care unit. Through the small glass window, Ruiz could see them working, lights flashing, doctors calling out numbers, machines beeping in frantic rhythm. Coda sat perfectly still, eyes fixed on that window. His chest rose and fell, slower now, but his gaze never moved. The hallway around him echoed with footsteps, voices, the distant sound of another stretcher rushing through. But Coda seemed to hear only one thing, the faint, uneven heartbeat coming from the room beyond. A doctor in blue scrubs emerged minutes later, sweat glistening on his brow. He removed his gloves and exhaled heavily before speaking to Ruiz. "She's stable for now," he said. "Barely. Severe dehydration, diabetic shock, possibly malnutrition. If you'd come an hour later..." He didn't finish. He didn't have to. Ruiz nodded slowly, the words sinking in. He looked down at Coda, still staring through the glass. "You hear that, partner?" he whispered. "You did it." The doctor followed his gaze and smiled faintly. "That dog of yours, he's got good instincts." Ruiz gave a tired chuckle. "Better than most people." Time passed in fragments after that. Nurses moving quickly, lights dimming, the hospital settling into its late-night rhythm. Ruiz filled out the preliminary report at the nurse's desk, but his attention kept drifting to the hallway. Coda hadn't moved. Still there. Body tense but quiet. The soft overhead lights reflected in his dark eyes. To anyone passing by, he might have looked like a statue. But if they listened closely, they'd hear it. A low, steady sound deep in his throat, almost like humming. A child's guardian, waiting in silence. When a nurse finally came out with news, "She's breathing on her own now," Ruiz felt something ease in his chest. He crouched beside Coda, rubbing the dog's neck gently. "Good boy," he whispered. "You stay here with her a bit, huh?" Coda blinked slowly, tension in his shoulders easing just a little. His ears twitched toward the room one last time before lowering in quiet relief. As the hours passed, the hospital lights softened. Footsteps thinned. Ruiz finished his report, stepped outside for air, then returned to find Coda exactly where he'd left him, sitting in the hallway, eyes half closed but alert, tail curled around his paws. Through the glass, the child lay under a blanket, tiny chest rising and falling steadily now. The machine beside her beeped in calm rhythm, no longer erratic. Coda watched, unmoving, until at last his head dropped to the floor between his paws. His breathing matched hers, slow even, alive. Ruiz sank onto the bench beside him. For a moment, neither man nor dog said a thing. Outside, dawn began to break. The first light of morning crept through the hospital windows, brushing over sterile white walls, casting faint gold across the floor. Ruiz looked at his partner again. The German shepherd's fur glowed softly in the light, His eyes remained on the child beyond the door, calm now, no longer the sharp gaze of a police dog, but something gentler. Ruiz whispered quietly, as if to himself, "Guess you weren't just doing your job, huh?" Coda's tail moved once, slow, deliberate, before stilling again. In that quiet corridor, surrounded by the faint hum of machines and the first warmth of a new day, the bond between them hung in the air like something sacred. A life had been pulled back from the edge, not by luck, not by training alone, but by instinct, heart, and the silent understanding between a child and the dog who refused to leave her behind. And as the world outside began to wake, Coda stayed where he was, a steadfast silhouette in the morning light, keeping his silent vigil over the life he had saved. Morning light spilled softly through the thin curtains of the hospital room, turning everything pale gold. Machines beeped quietly in the background, not in panic now, but in rhythm, steady and alive. The faint scent of disinfectant lingered in the air, mixing with the sterile calm that only hospitals carried. On the bed, Lena lay still, her small frame nearly swallowed by white sheets, arms covered in faint bruises, a thin line of medical tape holding an IV to her hand. For days, she had slept without stirring, a fragile quiet that made nurses whisper in the hallways and made Officer Ruiz check in every morning, hoping to hear she'd opened her eyes. And then, that morning, it happened. A flicker, barely noticeable, just the twitch of 2 small fingers. Then another. The heart monitor quickened, a soft but distinct rise in rhythm. Nurse Daniels, who had been refilling Lena's fluids, froze mid-step. "Sweetheart," she whispered, "can you hear me?" Lena's eyelids fluttered once, twice, before slowly lifting. Her pupils adjusted to the light, unfocused at first, then slowly finding the nurse's face. "Hey there," Daniels said softly, her voice as careful as her hands. "You're okay. You're safe." But the word safe made something flicker behind the girl's eyes. Confusion. Fear. Her lips parted, but no sound came. She looked around the room quickly, trying to make sense of where she was. The bright walls, the machines, the strangers. "It's all right," the nurse continued, smiling gently. "You're in the hospital. You've been sleeping for a few days." The moment she stepped closer, though, Lena flinched. Quick, sharp, instinctive. Her small body stiffened, her breathing quickened. Eyes wide, as if bracing for something unseen. The nurse froze, her heart aching. "It's okay, honey," she whispered. "No one's going to hurt you." But Lena didn't seem convinced. She looked away, her gaze darting to the corner, as though searching for a familiar face. But there was no one. Only strangers in scrubs and machines that hummed softly like distant voices. The nurse sighed quietly, pressing the call button. "She's awake," she murmured. "Tell social services." Minutes later, the door opened. Ms. Clark entered, the hospital's social worker, a woman with kind eyes and a calm voice that carried quiet strength. She approached slowly, speaking softly. "Hello, Lena," she said. "My name is Ms. Clark. I'm here to help you. You've been very brave." The girl didn't respond. She just stared at the ceiling, fingers curling around the blanket's edge, as if it was the only thing keeping her anchored. Ms. Clark exchanged a glance with Nurse Daniels, the kind adults share when they realize how much a child has endured. Then she tried a different approach. "You know," she said gently, "someone's been waiting to see you." Lena's eyes moved for the first time, slowly turning toward her. Ms. Clark smiled, nodding toward the door. "Would you like to see him?" The girl hesitated. Her voice was barely a whisper. "Who?" Ms. Clark pressed a small button. The door opened quietly. From the hallway stepped Coda. The German shepherd's paws made no sound on the linoleum floor. His gait was calm, deliberate, not the sharp stance of a police dog, but the careful steps of a guardian returning home. The moment Lena saw him, something inside her shifted. Her eyes widened, not in fear this time, but recognition. Her fingers trembled. "Doggy," she whispered, voice cracking through the quiet. Coda paused, watching her. Then, as if he understood, he walked to her bedside and sat down with the grace of a creature who knew how fragile humans could be. He didn't bark. He didn't move. He simply stayed there, still as stone, eyes locked on hers. For a long moment, neither made a sound. The machines continued their slow beeping. The nurse stepped quietly aside. Ms. Clark folded her hands together, watching. Then slowly, Lena's hand reached out, hesitant, trembling, until her fingers brushed the dog's fur. The warmth beneath her touch seemed to dissolve something inside her. Tears welled in her eyes, silent, unforced. "You came back," she whispered. Coda didn't move dramatically. He just lowered his head, pressing his muzzle gently against her small hand. His breath was warm, steady. That single gesture said more than words ever could. The nurse wiped her eyes quietly. Ms. Clark smiled. "He never stopped waiting, sweetheart. He's been here every day." "Every day?" Lena's voice trembled. "Yes," Ms. Clark said softly. "He found you. He made sure you were safe. And now, he's here to make sure you stay that way." For the first time since waking, Lena's lips curved, a faint, fragile smile. Not from happiness, but from the first spark of safety returning to a soul that had forgotten what it felt like. Coda stayed by her side as doctors entered to check her vitals. She tensed again when strangers approached, small hands clutching at the blanket. But Coda's presence steadied her. Each time she glanced at him, her breathing slowed. When the doctor lifted her wrist, she looked down at the dog and stayed still. "She's calmer with him," the nurse murmured. Ms. Clark nodded softly. "He's more than that," she said. "He's her anchor." Outside the window, the afternoon sun began to fade, streaking the sky with orange and pink. In the quiet glow, the hospital room no longer felt cold. There was still fear, in the way Lena's eyes darted to every sound, but there was also something new: trust. Coda lay at the foot of her bed, eyes half closed, ears still alert. The faint rhythm of his breathing filled the spaces between the beeps and whispers. It was the kind of calm that told Lena she didn't have to be alone anymore. As night settled outside, Ms. Clark stood to leave. "Get some rest, sweetheart," she said. "You're safe now." The little girl looked at her, hesitating, then turned to Coda. "He'll stay?" she whispered. Ms. Clark smiled. "For as long as you need." When the lights dimmed and the room fell quiet again, Coda lifted his head one last time. The girl had already closed her eyes, breathing even, the first true sleep she'd had in weeks. Coda stretched slightly, lowering his head to his paws. His eyes stayed fixed on her, a silent promise written in gold and shadow. The nurse watched from the doorway, whispering to herself, "Who let this happen to her?" No one answered. The hum of the machines filled the silence again. But now, it wasn't an empty silence. It was one that carried the fragile pulse of healing and the soft heartbeat of hope, guarded by a loyal friend who refused to leave her side. The interrogation room was small and gray, lit by the hum of a single fluorescent bulb that buzzed faintly overhead. Its flicker threw shadows across the table where Detective Hale sat. A stack of reports spread in front of him. Across from him sat Marissa, Lena's mother. Her face pale, eyes rimmed red, mascara streaked down her cheeks. Her hands twisted in her lap like she was trying to wring the truth out of her own skin. She'd been crying since they brought her in, but none of the detectives were sure if it was guilt or fear that kept the tears coming. "I didn't hurt her," she said again, voice raw and breaking. "You don't understand. I didn't do anything." Detective Hale didn't look up immediately. He turned a page in the report, the paper's soft crack cutting through her words. "That's the problem," he said quietly. "You didn't." She blinked. "What?" He slid a photograph across the table. Lena, pale and frail in a hospital bed, an oxygen tube taped to her cheek. "Your daughter was hours away from dying," Hale said. "Severe dehydration, uncontrolled diabetes, malnutrition. She weighed less than most 4-year-olds. Marissa pressed her hands to her mouth. "I didn't know she was that sick," she whispered. "She was always thin, always tired." "Because she was starving," Hale interrupted. His tone wasn't angry, just cold, sharp. "You fed her soda instead of water. You ignored the doctor's calls." He flipped another photo, empty cans scattered across the floor, next to a discarded insulin prescription. "Your voicemail box is full of messages from the clinic, months of them." Her eyes filled again. "You don't understand. I couldn't afford—" "Afford?" Hale leaned back. "Your bank records show regular spending, on takeout, cigarettes, lottery tickets. You had money. You just didn't use it for her." Marissa's expression hardened. "You think I wanted this? You think I wanted my little girl to get sick? I'm not a monster." "No one said you were a monster," Hale replied softly. "But you made choices, and those choices nearly killed her." The silence that followed was suffocating. The hum of the bulb grew louder. Marissa stared at her trembling hands, voice cracking again. "I didn't hurt her," she said, pleading now. "I just didn't know." Hale sighed, closing the folder. "That's the saddest part." Across town, in a quieter part of the hospital, Lena sat by the window in the pediatric ward. Her strength was returning slowly. The sunlight looked softer here, filtered through white curtains that moved with the afternoon breeze. She held a crayon in her small fingers, tongue peeking from the corner of her mouth as she concentrated on the paper in front of her. Beside her, a nurse smiled, organizing medical charts but keeping an eye on her. "What are you drawing, sweetheart?" the nurse asked. Lena didn't look up. "Him," she said softly, pointing toward the floor. Coda lay there, curled up on the tile, head resting between his paws, His ears flicked when he heard his name, but he didn't move, just watched her with the quiet patience of a protector who knew that this too was part of her healing. The nurse leaned closer. It was crude, drawn with uneven lines, but unmistakable. A little girl lying on the floor beside a teddy bear, and next to her, a big brown dog standing guard. Above them, a scribbled window showed gray clouds and rain. But there was more. In the background, half hidden behind color, were empty circles stacked like towers, soda cans, and next to them, a stick figure of a woman on a couch, eyes closed. Red lines streaked down her face. The nurse frowned slightly, heart twisting. She knelt beside Lena. "What's happening in your picture, sweetheart?" Lena pressed her crayon to the paper, thinking. "That's Mama sleeping," she said. "And that's me. I was thirsty." The nurse's throat tightened. "And the dog?" A small smile tugged at the girl's lips. "He found me. He told me not to be scared." The nurse swallowed hard. "That's beautiful, honey. You're very brave." When Lena handed her the drawing, the nurse hesitated, then carefully folded it. Later, she passed it quietly to Ms. Clark, the social worker by the door. Ms. Clark's expression grew somber as she looked at it. She'd seen trauma drawn in color before. Words children couldn't say, painted instead. This picture told more than any testimony could. She tucked it gently into her folder. "This will help," she murmured. That evening, Detective Hale met with Ms. Clark in a small hospital conference room. The folder lay open. Crime scene photos, medical reports, and now a child's drawing sitting on top. "She said she didn't know," Hale said tiredly, "that she didn't mean to hurt her." Ms. Clark traced the lines of the drawing with her eyes. "Neglect doesn't always come from hatred," she said softly. "Sometimes it's just selfishness, apathy, but the damage is the same." Hale nodded. "The DA's preparing the case. Endangerment, medical neglect, child abuse by omission." "And the girl?" Ms. Clark asked. "She's safe for now," Hale said, glancing toward the pediatric wing. "Still quiet. Won't talk much to the staff. Only to that dog." Ms. Clark smiled faintly. "Coda?" Hale nodded. "Yeah. The department's letting him visit as therapy. She trusts him." "That's good," Ms. Clark said. "Trust is the first step back." For a while they sat in silence, both staring at the child's drawing. It was bright, full of life in some places, the bold orange of Coda's fur, the hopeful blue of the sky. But the gray shadows beneath it told another story. Finally, Hale said, "The truth's coming together. Slowly. She won't have to testify yet. But we'll need her story one day." Ms. Clark nodded. "We'll be careful. Right now, she needs to remember she's safe, that not all adults fail her." As she gathered her papers, Hale caught sight of Coda through the window, sitting outside the room where Lena slept. The dog's posture steady, gaze fixed on the small figure under the blanket. "Maybe," Hale murmured half to himself, "that dog's the reason she's still here to tell it." Ms. Clark gave him a faint, knowing smile. "Sometimes heroes don't wear badges," she said. "Sometimes they just wait quietly until someone finally listens." Later that night, as the hospital lights dimmed, Lena stirred in her sleep. Her small hand moved beneath the blanket, fingers twitching, reaching for something unseen. Coda lifted his head immediately, ears perked. He watched her for a moment, then laid his chin gently on the edge of her bed, close enough that she could feel his warmth even in her dreams. Her breathing steadied. Outside the window, the city lights shimmered in the distance, bright, indifferent, and endless. But inside that quiet room, something real and fragile had begun to take root. Truth, rising slowly from the silence. The investigation was far from over, and justice had yet to arrive. But in that fragile space between fear and healing, a child slept safely for the first time, under the watchful eyes of the one who had refused to leave her side. The courthouse stood like a monument of stone and judgment, its gray facade towering over the morning street. The sky was overcast, as if even the sun hesitated to shine on what would unfold inside. A crowd had already gathered near the steps, reporters clutching cameras, murmuring questions, their breath visible in the crisp air. Flashes lit the cold morning light as officers guided people through the doors. "Move back, please. Make room." Their voices echoed across the marble columns, the kind of day when truth and spectacle blurred together. Through the sea of strangers came a small figure, Lena, clutching a worn teddy bear to her chest. Her fingers were white from how tightly she held it. Beside her walked Coda, his black and tan fur gleaming beneath his fitted service vest, a police insignia stitched neatly onto its side. Each step he took was calm, measured, his gaze fixed forward. The crowd's chatter softened as they passed. The sight of the little girl beside the great dog silenced even the loudest voices. One reporter lowered his camera, whispering, "That's her, the K9 rescue case." A flash went off. Coda's ears flicked, but he didn't flinch. His focus remained on the child beside him, her every hesitant step matched by his steady pace. Officer Ruiz and Ms. Clark flanked them, shielding the girl from the rush of eyes and microphones. "Just a few more steps, sweetheart," Ms. Clark said softly. "You're doing great." Lena nodded faintly, gaze locked on the courthouse doors ahead. They looked impossibly tall, like gates to another world, one she didn't understand, but somehow had to walk through. When the doors opened, the echo of the hallway swallowed them whole. The noise of the crowd had faded behind thick walls. Inside, the air was different, heavy, sterile, filled with the hum of fluorescent lights and the distant shuffle of papers. The courtroom itself felt colder still. Polished wood benches, stern faces, the faint scent of old files. The flag behind the judge's bench hung perfectly still. Marissa, her mother, sat at the defense table. She looked smaller than she had in the interrogation room, hair pulled back tightly, eyes swollen from nights of crying or guilt. When she saw Lena enter, she froze. Her lips parted. A faint sound escaped, but no words followed. Lena noticed her too. Her steps faltered. The bear slipped slightly from her grasp. Coda leaned his shoulder against her leg, grounding her. She steadied. The bailiff announced, "Case of the state versus Marissa Hayes. The witness is present." The judge, a woman with silver hair and sharp eyes softened by empathy, adjusted her glasses. "Bring the witness forward," she said gently. The prosecutor, a young man with a cautious look, hesitated for a moment. He'd handled difficult witnesses before, angry ones, reluctant ones, but never a 6-year-old who had already survived more than most adults could bear. He turned to Ms. Clark. "Are you sure she's ready for this?" he asked quietly. "She doesn't need to be ready," Clark replied. She just needs to be heard. At the judge's nod, Lena walked to the witness stand. Each step sounded louder than the last, small shoes tapping on marble, echoing through the courtroom like a heartbeat. The judge watched her carefully, her voice low but warm. "Good morning, sweetheart. You can take your time. Do you know why you're here today?" Lena hesitated, her voice barely a whisper. "To tell the truth." "That's right." The judge offered a gentle smile. "And I hear you have a very special friend with you today." Coda stood quietly a few feet away, his vest polished, his tag glinting under the lights. The judge glanced toward the bailiff, then back. "Would it help if Coda stayed with you?" Lena looked at him, eyes softening instantly. "Can he?" "Of course," the judge said, nodding to Ruiz. "Bring him up." Ruiz led Coda forward. The big dog stepped up to the stand with calm, silent grace. He stopped right beside Lena, lowering his head so it rested level with her hand. Lena's fingers found his fur automatically. The moment she touched him, her breathing slowed. The tremor in her voice faded. A murmur rippled through the courtroom. Reporters whispering, cameras clicking softly before being hushed. Even the judge's gavel didn't sound harsh when she brought it down. "Let's proceed." The prosecutor rose, careful not to tower over the child. "Lena," he began softly, "you remember me, right? I talked to you with Ms. Clark a few days ago." She nodded, eyes on Coda. "I just need you to tell the truth, okay? You're not in trouble. You're very brave to be here." Her grip on Coda's fur tightened slightly. "Okay," she whispered. The prosecutor glanced briefly toward Marissa, who sat rigid, trembling. "Do you see your mom here today?" Lena's eyes flicked toward the defense table. Silence. Then she nodded. "Can you tell me what happened when you were home before the police came?" Her small shoulders stiffened. She didn't speak. The prosecutor hesitated, exchanging a look with Ms. Clark. The judge's voice softened. "Take your time, sweetheart. You can look at your friend if it helps." Lena turned to Coda again. The dog stayed perfectly still, not moving, not reacting, just there. His presence filled the space like warmth in a cold room. Her lips parted. "He came when it was dark," she whispered. "I was scared. I couldn't move. But then he found me." The courtroom seemed to hold its breath. "And what did you do when he found you?" the prosecutor asked gently. I held his paw." She gave a tiny, trembling smile. "He didn't leave. He stayed." A faint sound came from the defense table, Marissa's stifled sob. The prosecutor looked down, throat tight. The judge glanced at him, then at the child. "We'll pause here," she said softly. "That's enough for now." Lena looked up, uncertain. "Did I do okay?" "You did perfectly," the judge said, her tone breaking slightly. "You told the truth." As the bailiff escorted her from the stand, Coda walked beside her, his steady stride matching her smaller steps. The camera flashes outside the courtroom would later capture that image. A small girl holding her teddy bear in one hand, brushing against the fur of the dog who had saved her life. In the room they left behind, her mother wept silently. And though no verdict had been spoken yet, everyone could feel it, the tide beginning to turn. The truth was no longer hidden. It had walked into the room, small and trembling, holding onto a dog who never once let go. The air inside the courtroom had changed. It was no longer just quiet. It was the kind of silence that came when no one dared to breathe, when the weight of truth pressed down on everyone's shoulders. Lena sat on the witness stand again, her small figure almost lost behind the heavy wood. The teddy bear rested on her lap. Coda sat beside her, his head level with her hands, the faint rise and fall of his breathing the only sound she could hear. The judge nodded for the next phase to begin. Defense, you may proceed. The defense attorney, a tall man in a dark suit with eyes sharp as glass, rose from his chair. He didn't mean to frighten her, but his voice carried the tone of someone used to control, to winning. Good morning, Lena, he began, forcing a smile that didn't reach his eyes. She looked down, fingers buried in Coda's fur. You know why we're here, right? He continued, pacing slowly. We're just trying to understand what happened. You want to help us, don't you? She nodded faintly, but didn't speak. He leaned closer. Sometimes, little ones remember things wrong. Sometimes, when people get sick, they imagine things. You've been through a lot, haven't you? His words were careful, rehearsed, but to a child, they felt like a trap. Lena's shoulders tensed. She pressed closer to Coda, eyes fixed on the table in front of her. The attorney's voice softened, but his tone carried an edge. Did your mother ever hit you, Lena? Her lips parted, but no sound came. Did she ever hurt you on purpose? Coda's ears flicked. He could feel her fear, like a pulse beneath his paws. The attorney crouched slightly, meeting her eye level. Sweetheart, he said, voice almost gentle now. We just need to know the truth. Maybe your mom was tired. Maybe she was trying her best. You love your mom, don't you? Lena's breathing grew shallow. The courtroom blurred in her vision. So many eyes, watching, waiting. Her fingers gripped Coda's fur tighter until her knuckles turned white. Go on, the attorney urged softly. You can tell us. Her lips trembled. Her eyes darted toward her mother, Marissa, sitting only a few feet away. Marissa's face was wet with tears, her hands shaking. Lena, she whispered, voice cracking. Please. The sound shattered something fragile inside the girl. She flinched, her whole body pulling in on itself. Coda moved first. The great dog shifted closer, pressing his body gently against her legs. His weight was solid, grounding. He let out a soft, low sound, one breathy whine that barely reached human ears. But to her, it was everything. Lena looked down. His eyes met hers, deep, calm, endless. It was as if he was saying, You're safe. You can speak now. Her fingers relaxed. Her throat worked once, then again. When she finally spoke, her voice was so small that people leaned forward to hear. She didn't hit me, she said, voice trembling like a string about to snap. She just forgot. A pause. She forgot to feed me sometimes. She forgot my medicine. I told her my tummy hurt, and she said to stop whining. Her eyes filled. Her words stumbled out faster now, as though they had been trapped too long. I drank soda because it was all we had. I got dizzy a lot. I told her I couldn't see right, but she said I was being dramatic. The courtroom fell, utterly still. Even the air conditioner seemed to hush. The attorney froze mid-step, his questions gone. Behind him, Marissa sobbed openly, shoulders shaking. Lena looked toward her mother, confused, hurt, then turned away. Her hand found Coda's ear again, tracing the soft fur. "When I fell," she whispered, "it was dark. I couldn't breathe. I thought maybe nobody would come." Her voice cracked completely. Tears rolled down her cheeks. "And then I felt something warm. He was there." She looked at Coda. "He didn't leave me, not even when everyone else did." The attorney swallowed hard. His composure faltered. "You mean the police dog?" She nodded. "He was the only one who came for me." Her words hung in the air like a bell, pure, devastating, echoing off every wall in the room. Even the judge blinked slowly, her stoic mask cracking. She lowered her gaze, removing her glasses, setting them gently on the bench. The bailiff stood frozen. The stenographer's hands paused mid-typing. For a long moment, no one moved. Marissa covered her face, sobbing into her hands. "I'm sorry," she gasped. "Oh God, I'm so sorry." The prosecutor's eyes glistened. He looked at the child, then at the dog beside her. The harsh lines of law and evidence seemed meaningless now. Everyone in that room knew the truth had already been spoken, not in legal terms, but in something deeper, something human. Coda remained perfectly still. He didn't understand the words, but he understood her trembling, her tears, the way her small fingers curled into his fur. His tail didn't wag. His ears didn't twitch. He was carved in silence, the anchor she clung to in a storm of adults and judgment. Cameras clicked faintly through the glass doors, catching the moment when the little girl wiped her tears and whispered, "It's okay now. He found me." The judge finally cleared her throat, her voice soft but steady. "We'll take a recess," she said, though everyone knew they needed more than that. As the gavel came down, the sound echoed through the courtroom, a single heavy note that closed one chapter of pain and opened another, of reckoning. When the guards led Marissa away for a break, she turned once more, her voice breaking. "Lena, please." But the child didn't answer. She just leaned into Coda, her small hand resting on his head. He pressed closer, eyes half closed, breath steady. The only sound left in the room was that, his slow, calm breathing against the quiet sobs of the child he had saved. And in that silence, everyone present felt it, the pure, unbearable weight of truth. Not the kind that comes from evidence or confession, but the kind that strips away every excuse, every defense, the kind that leaves only one truth standing, that love, loyalty, and innocence had done what the grown world had failed to do. The courtroom was still. The echo of footsteps faded as everyone took their seats, the air charged with the kind of silence that only comes before something final. Morning light slipped through the tall windows, falling in slanted beams across the wooden floor, the same floor where a little girl's trembling voice had, only days before, shattered the hearts of everyone listening. Now everything would be decided. The judge entered, her robe brushing softly against the bench as she sat. Her expression was composed, but her eyes carried the quiet weight of what she had witnessed. Papers rustled. The bailiff called for order. At the defense table sat Marissa, Lena's mother. Her hands were cuffed now, trembling in her lap. Her face was streaked with tears, eyes red and swollen. She had barely slept since the testimony, her sobs echoing through the holding cell walls. Across the aisle, Lena sat with Ms. Clark, holding her teddy bear tightly. Beside her, Coda rested on the floor, his head lifted, alert but calm. The sunlight caught the edge of his badge, the one that marked him as part of the police force, though today, he was so much more than that. The judge cleared her throat. "Before sentencing," she said, "the court acknowledges the extraordinary assistance of the K-9 unit, especially Officer Coda, whose actions led to the child's rescue." A ripple moved through the courtroom. Lena reached down, brushing Coda's ear. His tail flicked softly against her shoe. Then came the sentence. "Marissa Hayes, you are convicted of severe child neglect and endangerment. Your actions nearly cost your daughter her life. You are sentenced to 7 years in state custody with mandatory rehabilitation. No contact with your daughter until deemed safe." Marissa broke down. "Please, I didn't mean to hurt her. I just didn't know what to do." The judge's tone softened. Justice isn't punishment alone. It's protection. And this child deserves safety. As officers took her away, Marissa turned back once. "Lena, I'm sorry." The little girl clutched her bear, silent. Too young to understand justice, too old to forget pain. The door closed behind her mother. The judge leaned forward. "Sweetheart," she said gently, "you're safe now. No one can hurt you anymore." Lena nodded faintly, unsure if safety was something she could yet believe in. Coda shifted beside her, brushing her arm. She turned, eyes glistening, and wrapped her arms around his neck. The room stilled. Cameras clicked. But no one spoke. The small child and the dog who had found her, locked in a quiet, wordless bond. Outside, reporters crowded the courthouse steps. Questions flew about custody, therapy, the K-9 program. But all fell silent when Lena appeared. She held her bear in one hand and rested the other on Coda's harness. Ms. Clark followed closely, shielding her from the flashes. At the top of the steps, Lena paused. The morning sun lit her face. She crouched beside Coda, hugging him again, a hesitant, fragile smile spreading across her face. Cameras flashed wildly. That single image, the pale-haired girl and the police dog who saved her, would travel the country within hours. Headlines wrote themselves, "The dog who gave a child her voice." K-9 hero and survivor melt the nation's heart. But Lena didn't see the cameras. As she walked down the steps, Coda at her side, she saw only sunlight and open air. A world that no longer smelled of fear. At the patrol car, she looked back once toward the courthouse, the echo of her mother's voice fading into silence. Then she turned forward. "Can we go home now?" she asked. Ms. Clark smiled softly. "Yes, sweetheart, you can." Coda jumped into the back seat first. Lena climbed in beside him, leaning against his shoulder as the car pulled away. For the first time in a long time, she closed her eyes, not in fear, but in peace. And beside her, the dog who had found her, saved her, and stood by her, stayed watchful and still, her silent guardian in a world finally beginning to heal. Spring came quietly that year, sunlight lingering longer, air carrying the scent of beginnings. 6 months had passed since the trial. The world had moved on, but for Lena, Life was only just beginning again. The small house at the end of the lane was full of warmth, children's drawings on the fridge, daffodils in bloom, birdsong through open windows. Lena sat on the porch steps, her hair neatly braided, a faint bandage on her arm. The color had returned to her cheeks. The emptiness in her eyes was fading. Claire, her foster mother, watched from the doorway with a gentle smile. "Got your shoes on already?" "They said he's coming today," Lena replied, clutching a folded drawing. "It's me and him, walking." "He'll love it," Claire said softly. "You two have something special." "He's my best friend," Lena whispered. A distant hum broke the quiet. Lena ran to the gate as a car pulled into the drive. Officer Ruiz stepped out, smiling. "Hey, kiddo." But Lena's eyes were on the back seat. A familiar bark filled the air. Coda. The big German shepherd leapt out, tail wagging once before locking eyes with her. "Doggy!" she cried, sprinting forward. Coda bounded to meet her, and they collided in the middle of the yard, her arms around his neck, his head pressed against her chest. Ruiz watched, emotion in his voice. "He's been restless all week. He always knows when he's coming to see her." Claire dabbed her eyes. "He's part of her healing." For the next hour, Lena showed Coda her world, the swing, her room, her painting of him. Finally, she gave him her new drawing, a girl and a dog under a yellow sun. Ruiz tucked it into Coda's vest. "We'll take it everywhere we go." When it was time to leave, Ruiz asked, "Want to walk him one last time?" Lena nodded, clipping the leash carefully. They walked the garden path together, step by step, sunlight glinting off his fur. She crouched at the end, hugging him tight. "Thank you for finding me," she whispered. Claire joined Ruiz, watching them. "You think dogs like him just know where they're needed?" Ruiz nodded. "They hear what the rest of us don't." As the sun dipped low, Ruiz called Coda back. The dog hesitated, glancing between them, then trotted over. Lena waved from the porch. "It's okay. I'll see you soon." Coda barked once, soft, certain, before climbing into the car. The car disappeared down the road, the evening quiet again. Lena stood at the fence, whispering into the breeze, "See you soon, Coda." Miles away, in the back of a patrol car, Coda lifted his head, ears twitching, as if he'd heard her. Sometimes the ones who cannot speak are the ones who teach us how to listen. Lena and Coda, walking once more down a sunlit path, two survivors bound by love, healing not through words, but through the quiet understanding of hearts that had already spoken everything that needed to be said. Love has many forms, but few are as pure, as loyal, and as selfless as the love that shines from a dog's eyes. German shepherds remind us of that truth every day. Their quiet courage, their steadfast loyalty, their way of standing by us when words fail. Lena's story isn't just about survival. It's about how the bond between a child and a dog can heal what the world has broken. If you've ever looked into your own dog's eyes and felt that silent understanding, you already know what real connection feels like. And if you'd like to learn gentle ways to deepen that bond, to see your dog not just as a pet, but as a partner in heart, I've found a wonderful resource that might warm your soul as it did mine. You can explore it anytime. No rush, no pressure. Because sometimes all we really need is a reminder that the love we give our dogs always finds its way back to us.